Okay, hello everybody. It's me, Henry Moser, again from the Student Academic Success Center in Portland, Maine for University of New England. And looks like you guys are hearing me because everyone gave me, well, many people gave me a response to the program. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is how to organize your writing. And specifically today we're going to look at organizing your writing for graduate level essays, okay? And I'll get specific to that in a second. Let me do a double check though. I'm getting a bunch of yellow notes. Can someone tell me that they hear me real quick? I think everyone's hearing me. Yep. Thanks, you guys. All right, I'm going to turn off the video part because, like I said last time, I just start staring at myself and I can't focus. So I will go ahead and stop that. All right, welcome, Nancy. All right. So again, how we're going to run this, if you haven't been to one of these workshops yet, is I'm going to go through the slides and we can definitely have discussion throughout. And how I'd like you to do that is to go through the chat box below. Go ahead and type in if you have a question. Let me know if you want me to repeat something. Just don't be shy. For the most part, I can see what you guys are putting in the chat box. So go ahead if you want me to do something. Alrighty. So I broke this up into 7 sections, which may be a little confusing at the beginning, but these are some hints for organizing an essay. Number 1, understand the assignment. And this is something I'll go over. Actually, I'm borrowing from another university, but they have a website and they have some pretty specific ideas for understanding the assignment. And we'll go over that together. Find the rhetorical information, or excuse me, find the rhetorical function, and that means know what you're writing. And rhetorical function for this conversation are the things like compare, contrast, cause and effect. You know, what is your purpose for writing this essay, or what type of essay is it going to be? Look to the assignment to help you with your organization. The assignment itself, in many cases, the way faculty has put it, will be organized. I've given you several different, in number 4 here, what I'll do is we'll go over several different ways to group when you're organizing your essay. 5 and 6 are 2 different ways, that are probably less used, that we'll go over those, and they may make sense to you, and they maybe give you a good way to organize your writing. 5 and 6, or 5 especially, is not used a lot, even at graduate level for writing. So when we go over 5, if you want to be a little more fancy in future writings, you might want to take heed there. Think logically. I've got an example of that. And find a model. Number 7 is sort of, find an essay that's similar to the one that you've been assigned, and see if you can outline from their essay. So obviously I'm going to explain all this stuff, but that's kind of the 7 that we're going to go over this evening. Again, if you want me to go over something, go ahead and type it in the chat box. All right. So let's start with, like I said, that web page on understanding the assignment. Okay. Now, if you can't see this when it comes up, hit the Scale to Fit button. And the Scale to Fit button is in your top left sort of middle. It's right underneath the 3 boxes. One of them looks like a W and a pencil writing. If you hit that Scale to Fit button and uncheck it, actually, you have control over the sizing of this web page. Okay? All right. So let's look at this. There were a couple things I wanted to touch on. But obviously we know some of the stuff. Excuse me. All right, before you can start thinking about the process of organizing, researching, and writing an essay, you need to ask yourself, do you understand the assignment? Okay? And this may not necessarily be for organization, but I want everyone to know that when graduate level students, when a big mistake that they make on papers when they do have to do a rewrite, it's usually because they're not actually answering the prompt. Okay? So It'll be extremely difficult for you to achieve the objectives of the assignment if you don't understand what those objectives are. Okay, so you need to think about that when you're reading the assignment. What are the objectives? What does faculty want me to demonstrate here? What are the objectives of faculty in me writing this paper? So, just do kind of a casual list as you read the assignment. All right, assignment descriptions usually contain a lot of information. That's clear. As you write more essays, you'll develop the skill of understanding what is being asked of you, but when you're first writing papers, deciphering the instructions can be challenging. I'm actually going to walk everybody through a sample assignment in terms of breaking up the writing prompt. Okay, to help you break down the assignment, please try the following steps. Now these are, I think we're going to go over a couple of these. Okay, this is a big one. And when I spoke to you earlier when I was talking about rhetorical functions, what kind of essay will you be writing? You need to look at the verbs, all right? When you get a writing assignment, there are going to be several verbs, and those verbs are key in telling you what you need to do. So what are you being asked to do? For example, you're supposed to analyze, consider, compare, reflect, argue, explain. These right here are rhetorical functions. These are types of writing as well as verbs, obviously, and here they're asking you to analyze something, consider something, compare, reflect, argue, explain. Recognizing the verbs will help you determine the type of essay and the type of paper you have to write. Okay, are you writing a personal reflective piece, which I think everyone in this group has to do? Are you analyzing something? Are you arguing something? Let me give you a quick definition of analyze that students sometimes need a refresher. When we analyze, we are breaking apart a whole, okay? So we have a large topic, and when you're analyzing something, you're breaking apart the pieces that make the whole. Whereas it's common to see synthesize, and synthesize would be kind of the contrary in that when you're synthesizing, you're taking all the parts and creating one whole, okay? You're bringing things together when you're synthesizing. And I'm definitely going to talk about this stuff soon, okay, when we talk about rhetorical function. For information on how to identify the type of paper your professor expects, please see types of papers. Okay, so I wanted to take a quick look at this. Here are some types of papers that we have seen: personal reflective essay, argumentative persuasive essay, expository essay. So personal reflective essay, I think everyone knows what that is. You write about your thoughts and experiences. It's usually a narrative. Argumentative persuasive essay, you guys understand that. That's when you're trying to prove a point. Expository essay. This is when you're trying to give information on a particular topic or a subject. An analytical compare and contrast essay. So again, you're breaking up an idea or a topic or a thought, and you're going to compare and contrast the different parts. You're analyzing, you're breaking up. Okay? So those are some types of papers, and again, look at those verbs, okay? And I'll give everyone some practice with this in a second. All right, identify the key terms. You've looked at the verbs, but now you need to know what you're going to do with all those action words. For example, are you supposed to analyze a theory? So thinking out loud, what does that mean? I've got a theory, say something for social work, relational cultural theory, and I need to analyze it. That means I need to break it up and find all the components that make up that theory. Am I supposed to apply a philosophy? Am I supposed to compare some ideas? Do I reflect? Reflect is a good verb. Reflect on an experience. Am I going to argue? Am I going to explain? So explain a position would probably be your expository. Analyzing a theory could be expository. Compare ideas. Reflect on experience. This assignment description. Okay. And I'm sorry, I don't want to go too much into this, you guys, but this is just a great resource right here, and I'll actually put this link in our chat spot in a second. Okay. Oh, and then these are, I'm not going to go into these, but this is just some advice for you. Consider the practical instructions for the assignment. When is it due? How many pages? What kind of formatting does it have to be in? What do your citations need to look like? Stuff like that, okay? And But these are, for tonight's discussion, these are the two keys here. Identify the verbs, identify those key terms. Okay? So understand that assignment. That's key to organizing your essay. All right? So hints for organizing an essay. And now we're going to touch on find the rhetorical function, know what you're writing. Okay? So how to identify a compare-contrast paper. And it's those verbs that are going to tell you what kind of paper you're writing. Okay? And I want everyone to understand, I can't tell you guys how to organize a particular essay. I can't say, MPH, you guys are writing this paper, this is how I would organize it. I can definitely do stuff like that one-on-one in tutoring time or something like that, or a professional writing tutor can help you organize a paper and help you research it. However, in a presentation like this, I can't get specific to actual papers. So, organizing an essay is obviously going to be very different and it's going to be varied depending on this little phrase that I like to use, rhetorical function. Okay? So what does that mean? Here we go. So another way to look at rhetorical functions are cognitive genres. So genres are types of writing, and cognitive is what are you being asked to think about? Are you thinking about your thinking? So sorry, that was pretty lousy. One second, you get this in a second. So you have three different large categories of rhetorical functions: descriptive writing, critical writing, or reflective writing. And we'll break these three down and we'll look at the different types inside. So again, I just want to reiterate this one more time, is that I'm going to show you how to organize, from a very generic or general standpoint. But I'm going to give you guys a bunch of tips, okay? All right. Welcome, Sylvia. Okay, so this is something to think about here, is any piece of writing for an academic purpose will have to perform at least some of the following rhetorical functions. Okay, so this is where you're identifying when you look at the essay itself. Julia, there are no handouts for this. Okay, the session will be recorded though if you need it, and just ask faculty and they'll have the recorded session available, the link. They'll probably post it in your course. Okay, any piece of writing for an academic purpose will have to perform at least some of the following rhetorical functions. Oh, that was something I wanted to touch on too as well before we get too much into this. When you're writing a paper at a graduate level, it's going to be rare that you're writing solely a compare-contrast. You're going to be writing some description. You're going to be describing a theory. You're going to be defining the different types of theories. You're going to be giving background. So, and then ultimately you're going to, compare and contrast it. So these right here are rhetorical functions, and I want you to think that, you're going to want, as a good writer, you're going to want to have strategies for writing all of these kinds of essays, because I think when I did my research with the writing tutors, these are the essays between public health and social work. These are the types of essays that you will be writing. Let's look at, so description, clearly you're describing a topic. You're defining a topic. History or background, you're going to, rarely are you going to write a paper solely describing the history of a topic. However, that's, some papers are just the history of a topic. However, most of the papers you'll be writing, this will be kind of the beginning of your paper, or when you choose to give some background on the particular topic. Okay, identification, you're going to be listing, you're going to be giving facts, you're going to be telling the reader different theories of different researchers. You're going to come up, this is where you're going to be doing a lot of citing. You're going to be identifying things. And again, every essay isn't going to have all of these components. These are rhetorical functions. And when you're writing, you need to perform some of these functions, okay? All right, let's see what this one says. Establishing significance, urgency, importance, which helps to answer the reader's questions of why should I care? Why should I spend time reading this? Okay, so this is kind of a hook in your writing. What is the purpose of this writing? You need to demonstrate this to the reader, not necessarily to get them that interested, but if you're doing a study, this would be the purpose of your actual experiment or your study. This would be when you're talking about, let's say, a current current legislation that's going to affect public health in Northern Africa. You're going to talk about the importance of it. You're going to provide the urgency again. So all of this stuff, when we're looking at these categories, these are all descriptive writing genres, okay? These are just little things that you're going to be doing. And what I do when I talk to students one-on-one, I will tell them to have this list and see how many of these you're touching on. Now, obviously, you're not going to organize your paper like this. I mean, it may be possible, but you're not going to do that. But you want to be touching on these different functions throughout your essay, okay? So now, when we looked at this, descriptive writing, those are some examples. Now we're going to get a little bit, a little deeper with Bloom's taxonomy here, and we're going to get critical. And these are your graduate level essays. These will be in it, however, these will be your focuses, okay? You're going to synthesize. You're going to integrate multiple ideas, multiple models, multiple theories, multiple methods into a new whole, all right? So, again, synthesizing is when we're bringing multiple things into one new thing. I mean, we're kind of creating a whole. And you see synthesize a lot in a writing prompt. Compare and contrast. So here we're going to be, again, we're looking at this, we're being a little bit we're using critical writing techniques, a critical function. One of the styles would be compare and contrast, say, two former leaders of social work theory for relational cultural theory. So just, you're going to compare and contrast. So how would you do that? So if you know you're going to compare and contrast, now you're going to be able to start organizing your essay. And again, we're not doing a lot of organizing here, but understanding that assignment is key, obviously, in completing the assignment. But the more, what I'm emphasizing here is the more clear you are with the assignment itself, the easier it is going to be to organize it. All right? Provide evidence, examples, and cases. So that would go back up here, some descriptive writing. Explaining. So when we are explaining, it's a little critical because we're actually going to be explaining, we're going to be giving reasons. Things happen. We're not just going to be listing. We're going to be listing we're going to be describing some things. We're going to be listing some things, some key ideas, and then here we would explain them. Arguing, that's a key verb for a persuasion paper possibly. Evaluation. Evaluate is a good one. It's different than a critique, but it's very common. You'll see evaluate, let's say, for public health, and I know very little about public health, you guys. I'm sorry, this is the first time I've worked with public health population, but let's say when we're talking about, and this is going to sound really ignorant, but let's say we're talking about maybe drinking water, cleaning techniques in rural Mexican towns, okay? And you've got 3 different techniques that you are researching, and then you need to evaluate them. So evaluate means you're going to give value to those different techniques, and then you're going to synthesize them, and you're going to talk about, so as you are describing the 3 different techniques that the Mexicans are using to clean the water, you're probably going to explain how they came about. You're going to describe some of the background. You're going to explain why certain areas are using them. And then you're going to evaluate them. You're going to give them value. You're going to say one is working possibly better than the other one, and it's working better than the other one because of this. And then possibly you're going to persuade the reader to look at a certain certain practice of water. What is the word? I keep thinking desalinization. Just read a paper on that, I'm sorry. Of water purification. You're going to give value to the different techniques, and possibly, depending on the assignment, you're going to, the assignment may ask you just to describe the 3, but it may ask you to describe and then come up with the best. It may ask you to describe the 3 and then ultimately come up with what you can use out of all of them to create a very good technique for water purification. And there's the word analysis again. So, again, this is not a ton on organization, but I can't just tell you guys how to organize without really trying to drive this point home that you have to understand different writing genres, okay? All right, so looking at the assignments, let's see what we've touched on. So a few people just got here 10 minutes ago. Oh wow, time's flying here. All right, so we want to understand the assignment. We want to find the rhetorical functions we are going to use. And obviously, when you look at something like this, you're starting to organize your paper a little bit. Okay, I need to define what water purification is. I'm going to need to talk about how thousands of impoverished Mexicans in rural areas are dying every year because of, I don't know, diphtheria. Would that be something caused from bad water, or is that mosquitoes? I apologize. Did you see what I'm saying? I am understanding the assignment. I'm defining the rhetorical functions, and that's helping me to organize it, okay? So let's look to the assignment itself. Let me answer a question before we go to this. Giselle's asking me, when writing, how much background information, sufficient background info should be located throughout the paper or focalized? Giselle, I don't know if I can really answer that question. I think that everyone can speak to. It probably depends on the paper. And Giselle, when you're asking about how much background information is sufficient, you need to look at that assignment itself. I mean, what is the purpose of providing background? Is the purpose of providing background so that you can ultimately have the reader be very clear of all the topics so you can synthesize them, or so you can analyze one larger topic? Or is providing the background information the actual reason for writing the actual paper? Why are you doing the background information? And that will tell you how long it needs to be. Should it be located throughout the paper or focalized? Again, that would depend. It seems pretty natural to be at the beginning of a paper, but also you're probably going to want to touch on, background information throughout, depending on how you've organized that paper. So, sorry about that, but first part of your question, I'd say it depends on the assignment and the topic, and then the second part of your question, I would say is going to depend on how you're actually going to organize it, okay? It's a great question. I appreciate it. If anybody has comments to these questions, go ahead and type them in, or comments to my responses. But let's take a look at an actual assignment. Oh, Ashad's got something going on, so I'll wait for a second on that. Let's see, look to the assignment. I will set that up while Ashad is typing. I'm sorry, Ashad. I don't know if the voice is getting interrupted if it's just you or other people, if somebody can speak to that, if it's choppy for everybody. And then I will move on, if people can hear me. Okay, thanks for that, everybody. All right, let's get going on this. All right, what this right here, again, if you can't see it, hit that scale to fit button, or I think I can actually make it bigger for you from here. Whoa. All right, there you go. All right, what this is actually a social work assignment for a master's in social work, and this is just such a typical assignment in that the faculty members actually organize the essay for you in the assignment itself, okay? So, what I did is I've got it broken into colors, clearly. So let's see if we can take a look at those. At the end of week 7, you'll submit a paper about relational cultural theory. Okay, here we go, orange. Briefly identify RCTs, that's relational cultural theory, fundamental assumptions in a 3 to 5 page paper in APA style. So it looks like there it's kind of a general description of what you need to write, but if you look a little closer, they want you to identify the RCT's fundamental assumptions. So what are the theories, what are the points that make up this one larger theory? Okay? So what kind of writing is that going to be? That's going to be that descriptive writing, okay? And fundamental assumptions, that's going to be some background. That's going to be telling the reader what's going on. And then look at the next sentence faculty has put out. What is your view? What is your view of the topic? Or what is your view of the theory and its value for social work practice? So this is broken up. What is your view of the theory, its value for social work practice? So what is your view of the theory? It sounds like they're asking you to evaluate something. Or what is its value for social work practice? So what is your view? Sounds like an opinion, maybe an explanation. Its value for social work practice. You need to evaluate the value. You need to give value to this theory and then synthesize it, bring it together with social work as a whole. You could also reflect upon how RCT differs from the old psychology of both women and men. So here we're comparing and contrasting, and what are the implications for social work practice? Again, synthesis. What are all the implications for social work practice in that you're bringing everything together? Let's take a look at this. I don't want to get too much into this because it's somebody's paper, but take a look at this. Briefly identify the fundamental assumptions. You are doing a summary here. A summary is a shorter version of a longer piece of writing. Summarizing exercises usually set to test the understanding of the original. For this paper, the summary will also provide background for later parts of the story. Again, this paper is not your paper, but this is an example of what it's asking for. Let's look at this. What is RCT's value for social work practice? Here, how are you going to justify the value? Faculty is looking for a critique, what is meant by being critical. So obviously, when I did this workshop, I was working real specific with students in organizing this essay. This gives you some ideas on writing a critical analysis. You know, this would be something I would talk to you if you were writing a critical analysis. I would help you with this part, but I can't teach you actually how to do that right now. Analyzing. So what does this mean? This looks like a lot of words and a big mess, but what I wanted to, I guess what I'm pointing out to everybody here is this is the contrast component of the paper. A paper is going to be broken up into many different genres, okay? Oh, this is good. I like this point on the bottom. Real-world application also call for synthesis, okay? So when you're tying real-world application to a theory or a practice, that's an example of synthesis. Oh, and that's looking at the rubric. I guess before I go past that, I'll talk about that. So looking to the assignment is a great way to organize the assignment. So let's look at this. Go back one more time. Sorry, this will be real quick. I can't see. Sorry, here we go. Can't find the go back to beginning button. Beg your pardon, and here we go. All right, so how would I organize this essay? And I think it's so obvious when you look at it, you know, when you've broken it up like this, and this is just what I would preach to you now as a writing tutor, is break up the assignment just like this, and this is exactly how I would write this paper. Obviously, I'd begin with identifying the fundamental assumptions. I would use descriptive writing. I'm not really going to compare and contrast them necessarily until I get down here later. But here, the next section of my paper is going to be my view, and then I'm going to evaluate it. So this is exactly the organization of my paper, everybody. Okay? So the faculty has done it. And I do want to speak to one more thing on this, is to look at the rubric. And on this particular example, I think I found on the rubric, I found an example on the rubric where they were asking for something that was not in the assignment. So again, look at that rubric, everybody, when you are, before, you know, as you're organizing your writing, as you're organizing your research. It's definitely beneficial to look at that rubric. I think I found the bullet number 2, how do gender roles become the basis? I think that wasn't really spoken to in the assignment, and yeah, but that was the one that wasn't spoken to at all in the assignment. However, it's in the rubric. Okay, so it's something you're definitely going to want to touch in. So when you're planning your paper, when you're planning your writing, obviously you want to make sure you're hitting all the key components, okay? All right, let me go ahead and look at these questions. I love you guys' discussion. All right. All right, here we go. Is it appropriate to use acronyms in our writing? Now it's breaking up on my end too. In AMA, I believe if we introduce EG, Centers for Disease Control, then we can use acronym throughout. That's absolutely correct, Joe. You just need to make sure you list the actual title or the words for the acronym the very first time. Put it in parentheses, all caps, directly afterwards, and then you can use it for the rest. Diane's asking me, when a paper requires a student to provide its own input, is it best to write in third person or okay to utilize first person? That's a great question. Let's look at that. When we are writing, when we're using, I guess, yeah. All right. I would say, Dahian, when you are, for most of your essays, you're going to be putting everything in the third person, okay? I think for the first paper that you write in MPH and the first paper that they write in social work too, they're actually personal reflections or personal narratives, so they would be in first person. Although now I'm thinking about MPH's first paper, you guys are looking at 5 different, can someone refresh me on that real quick? Maybe type it in the box. It was kind of a generic question for you guys first, social work. I'll answer everyone's questions in a second, but can someone type that in? What was the generic writing prompt for your essay you're writing in public health right now? Nobody's typing anything. Maybe it hasn't been assigned yet. Pauline looks like she might put it in there. I think you had to look at 5 different public health policies, possibly, something like that. So that one would definitely be in third person. Oh, here we go. We got some typing. I'll be quiet for a second. Five essential public health services, not first person. Choose one state or local agency that you have identified as doing review the 10 essential health. Choose 5. Okay. So Ashley, what Ashley's written to us, this is clearly not going to be in first person. Okay. So anybody who heard that, you didn't hear that from me at all. It's definitely going to be third person. I know social work's paper is first person, the first one. You're not going to go in and out. I think somebody asked that. I think the first question. You're not going to really do a personal narrative, start in first person and then move to third person. That's probably not appropriate for any paper that you're going to be writing. What does that mean, third person? This is when you're going to be writing things like the researcher, and it feels kind of corny the first 20 times you do it, but then it's going to become as smooth as writing the word I, okay? The researcher has found, the researcher has studied, the researcher, this is when you're writing literature reviews. Researcher is a great noun to use as a subject of a lot of those sentences as opposed to first person I. Derek asked me if has, let's say, 5 requirements, do you try to fit them all in the thesis? Yeah, that's a good point, Derek. A lot of people will organize their essay through their thesis, and again, when you're writing a paper, the thesis itself is going to evolve over time, but it's a great way to outline your paper or let's say you outline your paper first with the 5 different things, the 5 different requirements, and then you try to create a thesis that's going to fit to that. Or you're going to write your thesis first to help you create, some of the topics that you're going to research or write to. It's kind of evolving, going back and forth, and I always tell students to not write a thesis statement. I always tell them to write kind of a focus statement. What are some points you really want to get clear? What is something that's definitely going to be in your final thesis statement? However, don't worry about writing a thesis statement at the beginning because you spend too much time trying to get it right, when in fact, many of the components of your thesis you may not even touch on, and you may not even research those or write to those. So have kind of a working thesis, a working statement with some ideas of what you're going to look up, what you're going to research. So I think what you guys, let's look at your first essay, and I think this would be kind of cool if we can speak to this, and how they relate to state or local. So this is good. I like this, how they, let's look at that part, and how they relate to a state or local organization. If you guys don't know where I am, I'm so sorry. I am in the chat room, and I noticed it doesn't, when I'm highlighting it, you guys don't see. So Tiffany said how they relate to a state or local organization. So what you're doing there is you're synthesizing. You're going to describe the public health service, and then you're going to describe how it relates to a state or local organization. So you're synthesizing. When you relate something, you're bringing something together. Okay. What is your understanding on health as a human right? That's the social work paper. I can see what you're writing, Stephanie. All right. Our current paper asked us to write about what we have learned with this assignment. I think specifically what questions. Yeah, I read that, Ashley. Thank you. All right, so what David said. This is getting a little choppy with the questions. I apologize. Let's see what David's got. I'm writing for an MPH class about a recent survey. I want to create a link to the survey that I'm describing. Is it okay if I don't footnote the internet resource? Okay, David, that's a pretty specific question, not really what we're talking about. What would I do? Is it okay if I don't footnote the internet resource that I'm linking to? Now, you would definitely have to cite the resource. And David, if you want to talk to me later about that, we can do that, okay, get specific. But here we're talking about organizing essays. I think we spent a lot of time last week talking about citations or the week before. Let's look at grouping. Here's some ideas for organizing an essay. Okay. Some possible ways to group ideas or subtopics when working with a fairly general assignment question. Okay. Here we go. This is key here. Note if your subject or paper is complex enough, you're going to end up using more than one of these within a single paper. And when I say these are ways of grouping. Organizing an essay through chronological sequence. It's very natural when you're writing a narrative, when you're describing the history of a topic. So, again, this would be first person if you're going to talk about your feelings on health as a human right. But if you're going to describe the history of a public health policy, obviously you're going to describe that chronologically. So the chronological sequence, the history of a particular public health policy is going to be organized chronologically, just the beginning. But obviously, this is just going to be one component of your bigger essay, okay? But some can be organized completely chronologically. Groupings by category. So when I wrote my literature review, when I did my master's thesis, I had, no, that's a little specific. I'm trying to think without too much background. Here clearly you're breaking it up. You're breaking it up by categories, types, kinds. This is what we've been learning since we were young children writing. We're breaking it up on this. It's very clear if you're writing a cause and effect paper, you're going to organize your paper by ultimately what caused. Maybe you're going to start with an effect and then go back to what caused it, and then ultimately go back to the effect, and then its implications on modern day society, whatever you're writing about. Problem solution. You're probably going to describe the problem. You're probably going to come up with. So let's go back to this. Let's see if I can help you with problem solution. Okay, so let's say we're writing a problem solution paper. You're going to describe the problem. You're going to define it. You're going to give a little bit of background on that problem. You're going to identify several issues in terms of the problem. Obviously, this is going to be your whole first couple of sections on a problem solution paper. This is going to be your next part. Is going to be establishing the significance. Why is this a problem? And then ultimately, how did it get solved? What were the different strategies? You can compare what was done to solve it. Maybe there were different ways to solve it. Going to provide evidence. Obviously, this is not a good organization of a paper, but I think you see that when you hit these are different ways, and you're going to break it up further. by a series of steps. If you're explaining the process, how to do something, that would be obviously an easy way. This is what I've said a couple of times, but let's look at this again. By defining or giving background on the subject and comparing and contrasting it, integrating it with another subject. What does that mean? Integrating, synthesis, providing synthesis. Other theories, issues, challenges, models, these are all words that you guys are going to be writing about in your two programs. Usually in paragraphs that are using one of the other types. Okay, how do we break this up? And people want to know, how long. I call them sections, and your sections can be, you're going to define your section. All right, you're going to define your section as a paragraph. You're going to define your section as, 3 subheadings to a previous larger heading. And when I give writers advice with how long to make subsections or how long to make their paragraphs or how long, you're going to look at your particular subheadings. You want them all to match. You're not going to, let's say I'm talking about, let's say I'm evaluating something, okay, and I'm going to give 3 good points to a particular theory, all right? So I'm going to give 3 good points to a particular theory. I don't want 1 point or 1 section to be a page and a half, and then the next 2 sections together barely make half a page. What I'm doing there is I'm pointing out that there's 1 really good part of this theory and 2 others that I just kind of reached to make it a list of 3. So you want to, when you're making an argument, you want to balance your length and your in-depth description. And if you're going to have 2 or 3 citations, you're going to want to have 2 or 3 citations for all of those. You want to make it somewhat uniform. However, obviously, it's not going to be identical. You're not creating, a very robotic paper. So let's look at this. Examples of groupings. Oh, this is the Health as a Human Right paper. So let's see if we can kind of diagram this essay. Can you trace how your thinking on this issue has evolved, how you have developed your basic assumptions? Now, someone asked me about first person. If I see this, it's in first person. If I don't see the word you and your, put it in third person. So I would say if you're going to write 15 papers in the next couple of years, 14 of them are going to be in third person, okay? So when you see you and your, possibly in your discussion boards, you're going to be using first person a lot because you're going to be synthesizing your ideas with other people's ideas. However, it's definitely appropriate to write third person. The researcher found that the theory from 1978 was very similar to the theory from 2006. So you're synthesizing those 2 ideas with your thoughts, but you're not even using your name in there. You're using third person. But if we look at this, can you trace how your thinking on this issue has evolved? How have you developed your basic assumptions? So how am I going to do that? I'm going to group that chronologically. I might be fancy. I might talk about where I'm at now. I might give a nice description of where I am now with my view on health as a human right, and then I'm going to move to my history and my background. Okay, I'm going to then I'm going to write a real chronological sequence. I'm going to talk about how when I was a kid, my mother had cancer. Well, let me say this. When I was a kid, I didn't care about it. Then when I was a teenager, my mother got cancer. And suddenly I became very interested in it, and at the beginning, when I was younger, I thought if you got money and you get health, that's good, but then when my mom got cancer, we didn't have any money. I'm making this up, I'm sorry, but this is, I'm tracing my evolution of my understanding of health as a human right. Okay, how do you think human rights and health should be defined by social work? So how do you think? Again, they're asking for first person for this paper, but again, if you saw that in others, I think that would be asking for something in third person. But how do you think human rights and health should be defined by social work? You're coming up with some opinion here, what supports your definition. A lot of citations. So this paper is kind of organized for you. And again, is this going to be your section 1? Is this going to be section 2? Is this going to be section 3? Probably not. You can have your biggest outline. Let's see if I can give everybody an example here. I don't know if this typing actually works. But let's say I see that somebody has a question and I'll get to that in a second. Maybe not. But let's look at how I would do this. I'm going to write my personal narrative on my evolution. I'm going to talk about the beginning. This is my first outline. The beginning, the middle, and the end. Okay, this is as basic as it gets. All right. So now I'm doing this chronologically, and this is my very first outline for this organization. And obviously, I'm going to fill this up. What happened at the beginning? I'm going to talk about, I'm going to put things like, okay, in the beginning, I had this opinion, and then I had that opinion, and then I'm going to break up the opinions, and I'm going to talk about, and then at the end, maybe I'm going to describe my current view, okay? And obviously, I want that at the beginning, even though that's the end. I'm going to describe my current view. So now I'm organizing a little bit better. So I'm going to call this 1A, I guess, whatever I want to call it, my current view. My current view. And then I'm going to talk about how I got there, okay? And then in the middle, I can talk about possibly cancer. I can talk about going to undergrad. I can talk about my job working at the homeless shelter. So what I'm doing here, as you can tell, is I'm obviously organizing, and this one is without research, so it's very simple. I'm just making some stuff up. I don't know how we can see that, but I think you guys get an idea how I organize things. I just start with the most basic in the beginning, middle, or end. You're not going to use those words unless you're doing this, but this is how I'm going to break it up, okay? And we may have another chance to do a specific example like that. All right, I spoke to this one earlier. I'd like to focus on this for a second. Think of the reader when you're organizing an essay. And this, when you're editing your essay and you're fixing your essay, it's great to think of your reader to make some fixes at the end. However, I'd like to stress the fact that you want to focus on the reader at the beginning, okay? If we do take a look at this, these are some good things to ask yourself. What would the reader need to know first in order to have a grounding, to understand your later ideas? So this is just your natural thinking. This is, kind of logic, which we'll talk to in a second. But this is your natural thinking. If I'm going to talk all about the water practices in southern Mexico and which one I think is the best, I'm probably going to have to describe the three components. And obviously the reader's going to need to know the three components before I tell them which one's the best. What would make them excited to read on, again, and what do I say for this is if you can explain the purpose of your essay in your writing, it's a great hook. It's, why are you doing this? Why is this important? Many people are dying in northern rural Mexico. You know what I'm saying? You want to get people interested in providing some reason. I like this one. What's the first thing that springs into their mind as soon as you start coming up with your own theories? Is the person going to instantly say, "Oh, that's a bunch of nonsense," or "I totally agree with that"? Can you read what their thoughts are going to be? And then, is that the great time to provide a citation from a professional researcher? And what do you need to convince them is true before you're, if you're doing a problem solution or persuasive paper? Before you can convince them of your later points, what do you need to convince them is true is first. So think of the reader. And this is a lot of logic here as well, and this is natural to people, but something to keep in the back of your mind. All right. So thinking logically, what specific questions would flow naturally out of a more general statement you just made? For instance, if I were to say, we've been teaching grammar ineffectively for many years, some questions that might logically follow would be this. So look at that. We've been teaching grammar ineffectively for many years. So maybe this is my thesis, my working thesis, my very first sentence. This is what I want to prove. This is what I want everyone to see. And then I'm just going to ask some questions that would logically follow, and then I'm going to start organizing my essay. So we've been teaching grammar ineffectively. So what exactly have we been doing? Description. Why is it ineffective? Explanation. Is there a more effective method? So now you're synthesizing some of the other bad ideas to coming up with a better one. what would it look like? Oh, that's what you're doing right there. I'm sorry. So what would the more effective method look like? So you're again, and I want to tell everyone this, and this is reiterate this point, is make connections to the real world. Make connections to what you're studying, what you're researching, to your particular field of study. Okay? Again, that synthesis is one of the highest levels of thinking on Bloom's taxonomy, is synthesizing research into actual, authentic situations. So what does this mean? Is there a more effective method? So, I'm sorry, so what we're looking at here, you're looking at questions. We've been teaching grammar ineffectively. There's some questions, and look at what I've done. Did I organize my entire paper? Maybe. Look at this real quick. Okay, so what I'm saying, I think I said this earlier. We've been teaching grammar ineffectively for many years. Maybe my bigger thesis statement is writing instruction at the graduate level has many, many hurdles before it becomes better, before it becomes what we want it to be. This is going to be a small part of that bigger essay. This, obviously, I'm going to provide a little background. So what I've done here, instead of organizing the entire essay, I've organized a section of my essay. So this would be a section, my background, where we're talking about how grammar is so bad. And then I've got some subsections to my larger section. So whenever you have a heading or a large section, always ask yourself, what are some logical questions that come after? And that's a great way to organize your essay for other ideas, or to come up with other ideas. A lot of times we think, hey, I've got this great thing, but I don't really know where to start. I don't know what to write. And let's see if I can do something. I'll tell you, I'm going to try to show you guys how let's see, you guys can't see this, I'm sorry. All right, see if I can isolate that. All right, so you guys are going to see, let me give you another screen quickly. Okay, so how would let's say this is such a small section of my big paper. My big paper is, like I said earlier, my biggest topic is grad level writing instruction. Okay, that's my big, giant topic, okay? And I've got that broken up into 10 different subsections, okay, or 10 different sections. And these are all really good because I'm such a great writer and researcher and organizer. All right. However, obviously, one of those sections happens to be this. Whoops. One of our sections happens to be this guy right here. Okay? So that right there is one of my sections. Now, when I'm writing my paper, and this is how I've become a writer on Word, and I'm sure a lot of you guys use this strategy, but I'm going to brainstorm my 4 questions that come from this subtopic, and obviously there's a huge paper, I've got 10 of them, but here's one. I break it up with my 4 questions, and then I'm just going to start writing, maybe looking at my notes, and I'm going to say, okay, the study from 2011 from Dr. Perkins spoke to online instruction with grammar. And then I also did a research on the 2009 study by Moore, who mentioned it's terrible because, the faculty is ignorant to basic grammar. Now, if you notice, that it doesn't belong there. That, as I'm doing this research or my organization, I'm going to notice that point belongs down there. So as you can tell, I'm actually writing my paper while I'm organizing. I've done a real general organization here, you know, real kind of larger skeletal outline. But now I'm going to start, you know, putting in some of my research, and I'm going to say, so how have we been teaching grammar? I'll talk about the high school study, and then I'll talk about the study that described how there was no connection between high school and undergrad. Like you're completely taught everything absolutely differently. All right? Now, I'm going to talk about why that's ineffectively, so I'm probably going to want to use that guy again. I'm going to talk about how that's happening, and then I'm going to want to apply, you know, why I think that's ineffective. Is there a more effective method? And then here, obviously, I'm going to talk about the great study I found on an effective method, and here, what would it look like? So I hope this is a decent example of how I actually outline my papers, you know, straight on Word, and I start writing within them. Okay? Let me see if anyone has any questions on that. Okay. All right, I think that, let's see, touched on everything. Oh, finally, this is one. I thought we were done. I've got one more. I'm sorry, it's 8 o'clock, but let me do this one quickly. This is interesting. This is called a reverse outline. Okay? Find a model of organization for a similar type of writing. So once you've identified those rhetorical functions, you can do a Google search. You can look for certain sample essays for persuasion and find one that's kind of close to yours, and then see if you can do what's called a reverse outline. So you are going to, instead of outlining a paper then writing it, you are actually have the paper written in front of you, and you're going to outline that, and then you can use that outline for your paper. Okay. So this is what it looks like, obviously. This paragraph gives definition. This paragraph introduces the main players. This paragraph establishes the urgency. This one provides the evidence, the author's viewpoints. Okay? So what I've done is I've outlined this. And then what I would do is I would just copy and paste these particular things to see if I can go back to that Word doc. Give you guys one more example. All right, are you guys seeing that Word doc? Nope. All right, where was that one I was just looking at? Find a model of organization, okay, and do a reverse. So this paragraph gives a definition. So how I'm going to do this is, okay, so my first section is I need a definition. My next section is the main players. Now I need to talk about the urgency. Now I need some evidence of the author, which is me. So a lot of times we call ourselves the researcher. We can also call ourselves, obviously, the author. Evidence that the author, evidence that supports my viewpoint, sorry. All right, so, and then I'm going to start writing right here. I'm going to put a couple of things that I think are important in the definition. Then I'm going to come down here. I might make a list of the 3 main players. And then as I'm doing this, I'm going to want to discuss why main player 1 is ineffective. And I'm going to talk about how main player 1 can get better, okay, how you can be improved upon. So I hope you guys kind of see what I'm talking about here, all right? And let me go back to our page. All right, so let's see what I got. Beg your pardon, and I am here. All right, this is reassuring. I just did something similar to this. Good, Christina. And Derek's asking, where's a great place to find similar papers? I don't have a place like that, Derek. I've done Google search. You know, something you can definitely ask your colleagues in the class. So right now, can I get everybody to go ahead and type in a question if you have one? I'm going to put in my email link, or my email, and go ahead, if you guys want to set up an appointment for organizing an essay, I can get you guys in touch with professional writing tutors. I do want everyone to put in your first and last name and your program if you haven't done this yet. So I see I see a Bridget, I see a Frank, I see a Derek. If you guys can put first and last names